The studio lights gleamed like polished steel, sharp and unforgiving. Cameras floated on silent wheels, locked onto every gesture. The audience wasn't large, but the tension inside felt like a packed arena right before the first bell. At the center sat Mr. Patel, perfectly dressed, perfectly confident, and perfectly sure of himself. For weeks, he had repeated one line on talk shows, podcasts, and town halls. "I know the Constitution better than any of these so-called experts." Tonight, he planned to prove it on live television. Across from him sat the host, Maria Collins, calm as a lake at dawn. She didn't raise her voice, didn't challenge, didn't argue. She simply let him speak. And oh, he spoke. "The Constitution is the backbone of this country," Patel declared, leaning toward the microphone. "I can quote it start to finish. That's how committed I am." The camera zoomed in. Maria's expression didn't change. She waited. Then, with the timing of someone who already knows the answer to the test, she asked, "That's impressive. Could you quote the Seventh Amendment for our viewers?" The room paused. Not noisy, not quiet, more like a drum heartbeat that forgot its next beat. Patel blinked. Twice. His smile stayed, but his eyes began searching. Anywhere for an exit that didn't exist, Patel cleared his throat, a small sound that echoed louder than any words that came before it. "Of course," he said, buying himself seconds. "The Seventh Amendment is, well, it's one of the core principles of, judicial fairness." Maria didn't interrupt. She just waited. The cameras didn't cut away. They zoomed in. Patel's hand moved his collar, loosening a little. "It's the amendment about, legal rights in certain cases. I mean, obviously everyone knows that." He gave a laugh. No one else laughed. The silence felt like gravity, heavy enough to press down on his shoulders. A producer behind the glass held up a timer card. 34 seconds. That's how long Patel had been talking, without actually saying anything. Maria finally spoke, her voice light as a feather. "So you're not able to quote it right now?" Patel froze. His smile collapsed into something unsure and uneven. Not word for word, no. There it was. The truth. No fireworks. No dramatic music. Just a quiet moment where confidence fell apart on its own. Maria nodded, not mocking, not attacking, just stating the obvious. "Thank you for your honesty. Let's move on." But the internet would not move on. Not for a very long time. Clips from the interview appeared online before the studio finished packing up. Phones buzzed. Chats exploded. The moment Patel paused after being asked a question became the new freeze frame meme of the day. Someone posted the clip titled, "Promise a Constitution," delivered a 34-second pause. Another user replied with, "My Wi-Fi does better under pressure." Within an hour, the video spread across social feeds like wildfire. Comments rolled in faster than anyone could read them. But the most interesting reaction wasn't from strangers. It came from the people who had stood behind Patel for months, supporters who believed every word he spoke. Some tried to defend him. It was just nerves. Live TV is tough. Others said, the amendment isn't the point, the message is. But others just went quiet. Silence can tell its own story. Meanwhile, Maria did not celebrate. She didn't post jokes. She didn't reference the moment at all. She simply did her job, asked a question, and let the answer reveal itself. In political debates, people often shout to win, but sometimes the loudest message is the silence that follows a simple question. And Patel felt that silence very deeply. The next morning, Patel's team called an emergency meeting. They gathered in a small conference room with stale coffee and worried faces. No one spoke first. They didn't need to. Everyone had seen the clip. Patel sat at the end of the table, staring at his phone screen, the moment replaying again and again. His confident smile, the pause, the stumble, the quiet collapse. He finally broke the silence. "I just had a bad night," he said, trying to sound steady. "It'll pass." But even he didn't sound convinced. His advisor leaned forward, carefully choosing every word. "People don't expect perfection," she said, "but they do expect you to be real. If you pretend you didn't mess up, it gets worse." Patel looked up. A moment of honesty flickered in his expression. So what do I do? She didn't hesitate. You acknowledge it. You learn from it. And next time, you come prepared. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a speech. It was simply the truth. Patel nodded slowly. That night, instead of posting excuses or jokes or defensive statements, he released a short message. I couldn't quote the Seventh Amendment when asked. I should have been able to. I'm studying it now, along with the rest of the Constitution. I can always do better. And I will. It didn't erase the moment. It didn't stop the memes. But it did something more important. It made him human. And in a world full of voices shouting to never be wrong, a little honesty sounded louder than any broadcast. Days passed. The clip was still circulating. But something unexpected began to happen. A few teachers started using the moment in classrooms, not to mock, but to discuss why the Constitution matters in the first place. Students watched Patel struggle, then they read the Seventh Amendment themselves. It became a reminder that knowledge isn't just something to claim. It's something you prove by doing the work. Meanwhile, Patel kept his promise. Late nights replaced late interviews. Books replaced sound bites. He began meeting with constitutional scholars, quietly without cameras. No press crew, no highlights, just learning. One evening, he returned to the same studio. Same cameras, same lights, same host. Maria greeted him with the same calm expression she had before. This time, Patel didn't arrive to perform. He came to speak, genuinely. When the interview reached the topic of constitutional rights again, Maria asked, "Would you like to revisit the Seventh Amendment?" Patel didn't hesitate. No showmanship, no dramatic pause. He simply recited it, word for word. The studio didn't erupt. There was no applause, no dramatic music, just a quiet nod from Maria. "Thank you." Patel smiled. Not the practiced, camera-ready smile. A small, real one. Sometimes redemption isn't loud. Sometimes it's just a moment you quietly prove something to yourself and know it. The clip still lives online. The memes too. But now beside them there is a second video. Same man, same question, different answer. And that one tells the real story. After the second interview aired, something shifted. Not in the internet comments. Those still bounce between jokes, debates, and recycled meme formats. The real change happened in how people talk to Patel, not about him. At a small town hall event, a student raised her hand. "I saw both clips," she said. "The one where you couldn't answer, and the one where you could." Patel braced himself. He expected a punchline or a sarcastic question or the kind of public jab he had learned to absorb. But instead, she continued, "Most people would have tried to pretend the first moment didn't happen. You didn't. Thanks for that." Patel didn't have a rehearsed response. For once, he didn't need one. "Thank you," he answered simply. Word of moments like that spread, slowly but steadily. Not viral, not explosive, just real. Organizations invited him not to debate, but to discuss. He joined conversations with professors, students, and civic groups. He listened more than he spoke. And people noticed. He didn't become a hero. He didn't become a villain. He became something rare in politics. A person who learned. One evening, while speaking to a group of young volunteers registering voters, Patel said something that didn't sound like a slogan. It sounded like truth. Courage isn't never being wrong. Courage is being wrong, being seen, and choosing to grow anyway. Someone recorded it. The clip didn't go viral like the first one did, but the people who needed to hear it found it. Sometimes the most important changes happen where cameras aren't looking. Months later, Patel was invited to speak at a civic education forum. No spotlights, no dramatic framing, no fiery commentary panels. Just a modest stage, a simple microphone, and rows of young people who had come to learn about how their government actually works. Patel stepped up, not as a voice of certainty, but as someone who understood what it meant to be humbled in front of millions. He began without notes. "Most of you know me because of mistake." Soft laughter rolled through the room, not mocking, but recognizing. I wanted to look strong. I wanted to win. But the Constitution isn't something you win with. It's something you respect. It isn't a trophy you display. It's a responsibility you carry. The room grew still, not silent, just listening. He continued, "When I couldn't quote the Seventh Amendment on live television, I felt embarrassed. But that moment did something more important. It forced me to learn not for the camera, but for myself." He looked out into the audience, not above them, but directly toward them. "If you forget everything else I say today, remember this. Don't pretend to know something to look smart. Learn it so you become better." That line wasn't clipped into comedy edits. It didn't spawn reaction compilations. It wasn't designed for views. But everyone in that room remembered it. Later, as Patel walked out into the cool evening air, he realized something. The story people will remember about him was never the stumble. It was what came after. Mistakes are loud. Growth is quiet. And sometimes the quiet part is where the real meaning lies. Time moved forward. The memes eventually faded. The news cycle shifted, and new debates took their place. But the story didn't end. It changed shape. One afternoon, Patel received a message from a teacher in a small public school. She explained that her students had watched both interviews, The Stumble and the Redemption, and had a request. They wanted to meet him. No cameras, no televised statements, just students, desks, and curiosity. Patel agreed. When he arrived, he was greeted not with applause, but with something better, genuine interest. The classroom was filled with notebooks, highlighted printouts of the Bill of Rights, and posters of historical court cases taped on the walls. A student in the front row raised her hand. "Why did you say you knew the Constitution if you didn't actually know all of it?" There was no judgment in her voice, just honesty. Patel took a breath. "Because I wanted to be right," he said. "I thought confidence mattered more than truth. But I learned that truth is what lasts." Another student spoke up. "So now you really know it?" He smiled. "I know it better, and I'm still learning. That part never ends." The students nodded, not impressed, but understanding. Then something unexpected happened. They began asking questions, real ones, about juries, about civil trials, about why fairness needs structure, about why rights must be written, not assumed. And Patel answered, not perfectly, not flawlessly, but sincerely. He didn't perform. He participated. When the bell rang, the students packed their bags slowly, not because they were tired, but because they were thinking. The teacher thanked Patel quietly as the room emptied. "You didn't just teach them the amendment," she said. "You showed them what learning looks like." Patel walked out of the school into the warm afternoon sunlight. His story had started with a stumble seen by millions, but now it was growing in rooms where no cameras were watching at all. Months later, Patel found himself standing on a quiet street just before sunset. No reporters, no microphones, just a fading light stretching long shadows across the pavement. He thought about how everything had started. One question, one silence, one viral moment. Something that could have ended his credibility in an instant. But instead, it opened the door to something real. He learned. He changed. He grew, not for applause, not for image, but because the truth carries weight and growth takes courage. People often remember the fall, but the rise, the quiet rebuilding, the effort that no one sees, that is the part that matters. And in that evening light, he understood the lesson clearly. Knowledge isn't about showing off. It's about showing up. Not once, not for the camera, but every day. The Seventh Amendment did not become a line he memorized to impress others. It became a reminder of humility, of patience, of honesty, a reminder that the loudest lessons in life sometimes begin with silence. The story didn't end with embarrassment. It began there, because sometimes the moment you are most exposed is the moment you finally begin to see yourself clearly. Sometime later, Patel attended a small community event in his hometown. It was held in a public library, the kind with old wooden chairs and sun-faded posters of famous authors on the walls. No stage, no spotlight, just a circle of people gathered to talk about civic responsibility. When Patel walked in, no one gasped, no one whispered, no one pointed. They simply welcomed him, like a neighbor. During the discussion, an older man raised his hand. His voice was steady, quiet, almost gentle. I saw that interview of yours, he said. Both of them. Patel nodded. He had learned to expect anything. A joke, a critique, a second-hand punchline. But the man didn't go in that direction. You know, he said, I forgot most of the Constitution years ago. I used to think I'd remember it forever. Turns out memory fades if you don't keep using it. The room grew still. Watching you reminded me that I should go learn again, too. Patel blinked, quietly surprised. This wasn't approval, wasn't applause. It was something much more meaningful. Shared humanity. Patel spoke, not from pride, but from sincerity. I used to think knowledge was something you earned once, he admitted. Now I think it's something you have to keep choosing. Over and over. The older man smiled. Not big, just real. That's the truth, he said. The group continued their discussion. No one filmed it. No one turned it into content. And yet, that moment would stay with Patel longer than any viral clip. Because growth may start in front of millions, but it becomes real in front of a few. In the quiet places, the simple rooms, the ordinary conversations, where people don't come to be impressed. They come to understand a year after the moment that changed everything. Patel stood on the steps of a small courthouse during a community Constitution Day event. Families sat on picnic blankets. Children ran around with paper flags, and volunteers handed out lemonade in plastic cups. It wasn't a political rally. No banners. No speeches scripted to impress. Just people, together, learning about the document that shaped their lives. Patel was invited to say a few words. Not because he was famous, but because he was someone who had learned. He stepped up to the small podium. No cameras. No countdown clock. Just his voice, steady and honest. A while ago, I was asked to quote the Seventh Amendment on live television, and I couldn't. The crowd listened, not with judgment, but with understanding. I was embarrassed. I thought knowledge was something you could wear like armor, but I learned that it's something you build piece by piece every day. He paused, not for dramatic effect, but because the truth deserves space. So today, I want to say this. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. Be afraid of refusing to learn. A soft breeze moved through the courtyard. A quiet moment. Not viral. Not loud. Just real. Patel recited the Seventh Amendment. Clearly, confidently, without hesitation. Not to prove he was right, but to honor the work it took to get here. As he finished, there was no roaring applause. Just warm, genuine smiles. A few people nodded to themselves. Some looked thoughtful. A child asked their parent what civil jury trial meant, and the parent tried to explain. And that was enough, because the story was never about the stumble on live TV. It was always about what came after. Growth, humility, learning, and the quiet strength of starting again. The final message wasn't spoken. It was understood. Real knowledge isn't loud. Real growth isn't instant. Real change begins the moment you decide to be better. The story ends here, but the learning does not.